Great. Thank you so much for everyone and for Amanda for that introduction. So my name is Amy Kuntz. I am an instructional designer at Penn State's Teaching and Learning with Technology. Penn State actually has 24 campuses that are geographically dispersed throughout all of Pennsylvania, and we support everyone, all of the campuses throughout the state. In addition, I've been an adjunct instructor coming up on 19 years now, teaching online, in person, blended, remote synchronous, both at Penn State and a community college in Eastern Pennsylvania called Northampton Community College. And so today's session, talking about time management strategies for engaging instructors, comes both from my adjunct role as well as my responsibilities as an instructional designer. So today, this session is supposed to be engaging and interactive, but if you're like, oh no, I want to lurk, that is 100% okay. This is built so that if you want to chime in and contribute, you can. But if you just want to be here to kind of lurk and kind of gain information, you're more than welcome to do it in that method. So this is navigating challenges together. The approach that we'll be doing is I'll throw up 10 different challenges and talk about ways to overcome them, knowing that we have a lot on our plates and are continually asked to do more with less. And so the first thing is, by the end of today's session, we really want to have you be able to list common communication, grading, and administrative time management teaching challenges in a variety of learning environments, as well as techniques to address those challenges in those variety of environments. One way that we're going to be doing that is using what's called a Padlet, which I'll demonstrate later on. But I also have some examples and things already built in to that, including using existing templates and resources. So that way you could come away with something tangible to quickly implement even this semester to help with your time management skills. So why do we want to talk about time management? It's really knowing that we have more commitments. There's different course modalities, especially with the pandemic movement towards having them be more permanent. Penn State, prior to the pandemic, didn't really have remote synchronous as an option, and now we've adopted that as of 1 year ago, as well as changing student expectations. So we really want to work smarter and not necessarily harder. So as I mentioned, for those just joining, we're going to be going over kind of 10 challenges and kind of talking about your perspectives and your resources, as well as posting them into a Padlet. So challenge number one is students expect to hear back from me immediately. And within my adjunct role, there are some students who think I'm on my phone 24/7 and it can answer them right away. And so one thing that I do is say, well, this is my second job. I am an adjunct instructor. I work full time. And so for me, ethically, I'm not going to check um, my email during my normal full-time job. And so that way they know I check in the evenings, maybe first thing before work, and on the weekends. So I would like to kind of hear from you. Do your students expect to hear back from you immediately? How do you kind of circumvent that or prevent that from happening? So feel free to post in the chat. I will try to save that and add it later on. But as Amanda also had, we will be using a Padlet. So great, thank you, Amanda, for putting the Padlet link in the chat. And so how this works is it's kind of like a sticky board where each column I have a challenge, and I also have some resources that I already pre-populated. So if you would like to add something to challenge one, you hover underneath challenge one and press this plus button. The one here knows it helps guide it so that you add the post to the correct area. And so we'll be doing this throughout today's session of pressing the plus under each challenge. So right now we're underneath challenge number one. So again, if you want to put it in the Padlet, great. Also, if you want to put it in chat, I will add it later on. So Jennifer says, I make my hours and days of availability very clear in the syllabus and learning management system, or LMS for short. Fantastic. And if you do want to unmute and talk that way, feel free. but I ask that you raise your hand first so we don't talk over one another. So while we're waiting, if there is anyone else who wants to talk, I'll just quickly go over some examples that I have. So here, the first time, like Jennifer says, is to communicate expectations early and often. So in the syllabus, and I break it down to responding to email as well as grading response. So if you're going to quickly grade quizzes or discussion boards, maybe say, okay, they'll be turned around within 2 days after the due date. But lengthier essays or papers will take one full week. And so that way students know the time it will have. Also be communicative of when you'll be away, be transparent. So I was away last week. I had to help someone. And so I said, I'm going to be a little bit slower than normal than my response time. And so by communicating that early and repeating that multiple times, was really useful. If you are going to be away, maybe have an emergency contact. I set up a faculty member up here that I knew that if there was something super urgent, that people could ask that peer faculty member, and then discuss faculty expectations. So how do you go about doing this as far as expectations? You could have it in the syllabus. You could also have a syllabus quiz that they have to get 100% right in order to see the rest of the course. That could be done in Canvas and Desire to Learn in multiple learning management systems, emphasizing it in announcements and email, and then even having a curation document such as Padlet saying, okay, well, what do you expect of me as an instructor? And so students can kind of give feedback that way. So that hopefully allowed a little bit more time. And so right now we have Hannah says, yes, setting up expectations for when you'll reply does calm down a bit. General timelines for emails, feedback on assignments, etc. Fantastic. And Danielle says we encourage our faculty to include those grading communications in their syllabus. Some have firm office hours, and their welcome videos and syllabus as well. And then one more, as a learning designer, I've helped staff create a FAQ for their students in class sessions. Wonderful, great. Thank you, everyone. And so I know that we've had some people just join, and what we're doing is having a challenge and then talking about ways to overcome them. We have a resource that we'll be doing, but I also like to give some faculty examples. So these are some general faculty examples. The first one is for a hybrid course. And so responds to emails within 24 hours between Monday and Friday, and then check sporadically over the weekend. I know that oftentimes there could be pressure to check over the weekend, especially for online courses, but two, you could set your boundary. So for this hybrid course, she set the boundary that is sporadically over the weekend. Here's another one by Kim Flanders. And then this is the general one that we have with the information sciences and technology area. So you will have access to the slides and you're more than happy to adapt any of these. I have permission for you to use any and all content for today. The other part I had talked about a syllabus quiz. This will be a challenge later on about do you use the learning management system communications, external, whether it's Microsoft or both. And so this instructor incorporates some communication expectations that she only wants communication through Canvas email. And so Dr. Jackie Shade said, by incorporating a question of the best way to communicate with me in the syllabus, it has helped set expectations of students and streamline the process. And that way it really helped alleviate time spent on email mechanics. And she teaches large lecture anatomy and physiology courses. So that drastically helped. So our next challenge is students don't remember what I said in class about an assignment, and writing an announcement is taking me longer than binging an episode of a TV show. So with that, Is there any, I have a question for you all. Do you use the announcement feature within your learning management system? How do you address students not remembering information about assignments? And Ryan, thank you for that information about the Padlet. For me, I had tested it that you could see everything, but I'll change the settings after the session just to triple check and make adjustments. And so Claire has announcements are a lifesaver for me. I'm able to address one student's concern and share it with the whole class. Great, fantastic. And two, if you want to put it in chat, feel free, and then I could also add it to the Padlet. And so this will have it down here. And then as far as scrolling in an area, if you hover over, you could see each of the respective areas. But I will go ahead and make up here a little bit smaller so that way you could see all the answers a bit more. You're most welcome. And so Hannah says you kind of have a template you use for weekly announcements so you could plug in due dates. Fantastic. And Danielle says some faculty have created their announcements in advance. Wonderful. And so some of those I had. So one is be consistent. And so knowing that certain flow, students recognize that pattern. Even if you teach a hybrid or in-person course, to have it be similar, not just for online, to have those templatized items. If you're saying, okay, well, a template is great, but what are you talking about? I want to see an example. Within this Padlet, anything that has underlined is a link. And so here is an announcement template example. And so knowing that things might change from semester to semester, you could have it be generically written and then maybe use brackets or highlights to say, okay, well, this might change depending upon students' quizzes. So this one, if students got 100% as a class, they might use the first part, that many of you took advantage of taking a quiz multiple times and got 100%. And then sometimes the class doesn't. And so I might use the second half. And so that way it's templatized, but also easily adaptable. So that way it's unique for each class. And of course, with generative AI, so sometimes I use generative AI to provide a template resource set you could customize. So that's wonderful. Take advantage of that. And then Kristen says, we strongly encourage using announcements, but use them appropriately. As if you have so many announcements, it could get lost. Yeah. So the same time during the week, if you're going to have it multiple times, I teach an accelerated 7-week course. So then I always say I'm going to be doing it on Monday mornings and Friday mornings. And then someone mentioned it earlier as far as setting it to be sent in advance. So you could have it set up and then have it be posted when it's ready to go. So I know this is available in like Canvas and Blackboard and many learning management systems. Wonderful. Some other things, and this is faculty examples at Penn State that I have permission to share. Well, the one includes Canvas has a feature of the calendar. So not just having a Microsoft Word or PDF calendar, but having it be embedded And so that way students can see all of that. So even though it's embedded in Canvas, she also has a Word document. So that way students can print it out and have it be color coded. And so Dr. Jackie Shea said by having a calendar of all the assignments, students have a quick reference and they could use the Word document to color code and to see it over time. So challenge number 3 is I have 50 new emails and I just checked it 2 hours ago. So I know it was mentioned earlier about using Canvas announcements to address a common student question or theme, and that's a perfect reason or a way to address this challenge. So does anyone else have ways that they address new emails? And this is a little bit more exaggerated, but I like to have it that way. Or if you don't have this occur, the other question I had regarding this challenge is what's your philosophy on email with students? I hinted at this earlier. Do you only use communication in the learning management system? Do you allow it for outside, typically Microsoft Office, or do you allow both? And do you have any tips to share? Great. So Amanda says, I like to suggest to instructors to create questions for the professor discussion board to see the common answers, to see the answers to common questions. Wonderful. Give it a few seconds. And Danielle says, I love the idea of forwarding everything to one place. Yeah, so I know that Canvas does, and Blackboard has a email forwarding system so that the way, if you're used to Microsoft Office and you're going to be there for the administrative side of your teaching anyway, sometimes it's good that way. But then again, sometimes the flip side, people like to keep it separate of having students in the learning management system and then administrative outside. Before I go to the Padlet to show some other tips, Claire says, I encourage students to use both so that way I could search names readily. Yeah, so I'm in that philosophy in that boat too. So that way it's addresses the concern of verbal housekeeping in the first 10 minutes of classes. Great. So that way you could address things that way, or just sometimes for in-person classes, discussion boards don't lead to success, especially if they're only taking in-person courses. And so some other things I had meant that was mentioned is forwarding it from the learning management systems, or the opposite of keeping it in the LMS. The other thing is to check the newest to the oldest first. Oftentimes I'm the opposite. And so I'm like, no, check the newest, because oftentimes students get in a panic and they quickly send you an email saying, I can't figure this out. And then they realize it after a few minutes and say, oh, never mind, I figured it out. And so that way you don't have to, you can say, oh, saw that you figured it out, you're good to go. Thanks for the follow-up email. Or if they didn't send a second one, you could check like, oh, they did submit the assignments, they're good. So you could still, instead of investigating what's wrong, you could say, oh, I saw you figured it out and were able to submit the assignment. Thanks so much. And then to that perceived kind of learned helplessness of leaning on instructors, if you guide students to where the answer is, of guiding and giving the answer versus only giving the answer helps kind of lift them up and troubleshoot and problem solve and do that critical thinking to help circumvent or prevent future questions. And then the last one, it says for my online classes, I always answer first the emails that have the course call letters as the first part of their subject lines. Great. So that way you're giving priority to those who kind of follow your guidance. Thanks so much. And so challenge number 4 is students email me individual questions and I just can't keep up with individual responses. So this could be kind of together, but I wanted it to be kind of separate and equal because sometimes if you rephrase it a different way, you might get something different. And so I know that we've already had some great suggestions. One was that crowdsourcing aspect of having an FAQ, having the ask the professor discussion board. And so those are all wonderful ideas. And some others that I have is if you see a pattern, get ahead of it and maybe do an ad hoc announcement to the class saying, I got a lot of questions about this. Think about this is how you would solve it. So that way it prevents other students from encountering it. And then 2, and this is more so for those teaching in technical disciplines, although you can help answer technical questions, try to lean on the help desk and have it be that way. And so one other suggestion in the chat as well, this can be time consuming at first. After replying to one student, I create a notes page and post it online by chapter for all future classes. It really helps in the future. Yeah. And then Claire says, tapping with early responses, I inform them at the start of the course, the response times for different issues, and but I also encouraging asking Google and different AI platforms, and then ask with you if you're more confused. Great. And then Amanda says, no professor at the university that they're at will analyze weekly trends and common questions, and we'll put up a weekly Canvas studio video. Wonderful. Thanks so much. So we have officially reached the halfway point. I have this as an example later on, but if you're wanted to know about an FAQ or how to do it, this is an example by Dr. Mike Torney. And so challenge number 5 is the discussion board or thread is 2 miles long. Now what? So sometimes they're shorter, sometimes they're longer. And so this is more so for you all. Do you interact with the online discussion boards? How do you communicate how you interact with students in these spaces? Is it their space to interact with one another? Do you respond to a few students? I know one instructor used to respond to everybody every single time. I know for me and my work and the introduction discussion board, I respond to everyone that first intro, but then afterwards I do it sporadically. So how do you interact with the discussion board and how do you make sure that you can consume all that great content by students and others, as well as do grading for it? So Danielle says class size probably plays a big part. So one instructor has a large online course, puts students in smaller groups, and then posts once to each of those smaller groups. That's a great way. To kind of build upon that, one thing that has been done is for kind of the intro courses, knowing that students really need connections within their major or discipline, is having those small groups by their intended major. And so that way it's kind of twofold, both for the class, but then also to help build connections and community. And Kristen, that's great. So some instructors create a schedule and respond to different sets of students each week. That way students get the same attention over the course in a manageable way. Wonderful. And so some other ideas for this include, if you do respond to a select few, again, over time, provide a recap or summary or highlight some student responses in that class announcement. And then, of course, have a rubric and rubric feedback. So within Padlet, somebody said, I respond to everyone's post the first time and then sporadically, intermediately thereafter. Wonderful. Thanks so much. And then Jared says about Canvas AI discussion summaries. So unfortunately, I haven't done that yet because it's not turned on by our university. We have to go through lots of checks and balances, but looking forward to that being turned on in the next few months. So that way they're not spending 30 minutes reading all of it verbatim. Good to know. And then if you want an example of a discussion rubric, I do have it here that you are feel free to use and adapt for your own use. And then this is what it looks like within Canvas. If you put it within Canvas, all you have to do is click, 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 and then students get that feedback right away. So challenge number 6 is office hours and online office hours. So if you hold online office hours and no one is around to join you, are you really there? And so I know that this has changed over time and over years. That kind of pre-pandemic, we didn't really have that many. Then we had a lot and it's kind of waned a little bit. But there's been some really great approaches of not calling it office hours and calling it coffee meetups or things of that nature. And so I wanted to see how you all hold office hours and get students to come. Claire says I have Zoom set to send me a message when students join, so I only log in then. And I do inform them the times I am available. Wonderful. Yeah. And so for online office hours, sometimes it's good to know like how, when, who, and why. So how is which tool, and if students are familiar with it. We kind of assume, I think now the students are familiar with it, and it's not often the case anymore. And so I always make sure that they know how to use Zoom and have it, especially on their phone. They tend to use the phone more within my class than a computer. And then when and determine the best. Oftentimes we lean towards, okay, I'm going to set my office hours, or you might have to submit them ahead of time. But sometimes I also do a poll and give students options and to see if I could change it to when they're most likely to attend. And then the other one is to define what is by appointment, of what's the process of setting it up. Can I just call? Can I quickly email you and you'll get back to me right away and set it up? Or you have to give 24 hours notice and things of that nature. And then if you want it to be individual versus group, and so if you have a waiting room for students to come in, and then why, to address questions, Oftentimes I do an exam review that tends to get a lot of students to join and know what to do for that. And so other examples include hold office hours for face-to-face classes. And that way you can catch up on work if no one shows up. And then online by appointment. And then Jared says scheduling tools like Microsoft Bookings are great. I know that Canvas has a Canvas scheduler within there. And then third parties like Calendly, or I know like Doodle Poll is another one. And then Jennifer says email by appointment for online and then send three times and dates that work. Wonderful. Thanks so much, everyone. And then here is an example of by appointment. And so they say that just send me an email and we'll schedule a time. And Kim Flanders is very flexible with evenings. Some others, Danielle likes Calendly, and that has worked really well and took away the tension around it. And then Hannah has done that coffee time. So coffee time with Professor Name can get more students to attend, and then giving them extra credit as the first time. Especially if they're first generation college students, they might not know what office hours are. Great. Thank you all. So we have 4 more challenges. Challenge number 7 is I keep taking attendance and grading, but I don't know which students are missing or missing work. And so I will go ahead and give a few examples, and then I'll turn it over to you to see about adding some more. So many learning management systems have analytics, so that way you could go and run them to see what students are missing, or when they have logged in last, or when they have a submitted assignment last. Also for Gradebook organization, to make sure that you have it and a method from left to right, so that we could quickly go to the current week to see what's missing, or the week prior, and then adding zeros in for missing assignments kind of pings students to reach out and doesn't elevate their grade. And so that way students can quickly address any concerns with the dip in their grades if they have zeros for those missing assignments. And then 2, some features like some learning management systems have it so underneath settings, you could say if you got a low grade, it's in red. If you got a good grade, it's in green. And so that way that is a visual reminder for students to see if they're missing work or not. And then last, I know it really hasn't happened much, but it's also a good way to back it up or download it as an Excel file, especially knowing that courses get archived usually at some point. And so that way you have the grades for that feature. So anyone else have suggestions for keeping attendance and grading? And again, I know that we've been doing chat a lot, but feel free to raise your hand and unmute and talk too. So not much for grading, but so far as just reiteration of liking the rebranding of coffee time or project check-in hour or midterm Q&A for office hours. Great. Give it a few more seconds about grading before moving on to challenge 8. So challenge 8 is I don't have time to write specific detailed feedback every week for every assignment for each student. And so this is an ongoing issue. You always want to give feedback. And so certain ways, of course, are using a rubric and providing a rubric and scores on a rubric to provide grading and feedback. But what are some other ways that you provide feedback for your students that aren't taking up too much time?
I can jump on audio. I'm
Yeah,
sorry to not raise my hand. I cannot
that's
find my button to do that.
that's okay.
But I have to jump off soon, but I wanted to share this one. Working with an instructor now, and it's a really great solution. It's using the rubric because she has so many students and she loves giving feedback, but she just can't. She's using a rubric where you have full points. Great, you met my full expectations, but then she has multiple zeros. Okay, you didn't receive it, and so the rubric has 0 point, 0 point, 0 point. But under each of those zeros is the reason you got the zero. So instead of having to type it out every single time, she's just selecting you got zero for this one because you didn't post the initial
Good.
X, you didn't provide an analysis, those types of things, and it has sped it up quite a bit for her.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that one. And this goes, Kristen's comment goes back to the earlier challenge. So Brightspace, which is Desire to Learn's product, and has a tool called Intelligent Agents that allow you to set up alerts to you and your students if due dates are missed or any other specified criteria, which can help with tracking and alerting students to miss work. Yeah, so for my adjunct role, we're moving from Blackboard to Brightspace this May. So looking forward to that. And then some others as far as um, Shannon has, I have a lot of faculty at my institution that use message students who feature in Canvas. So that way you could say message the students who didn't submit the summit. And then that way you could streamline the process. And then for feedback, Hannah says, have some standard responses that could be easily copied and pasted, then add a couple sentences particular to the student's individual submission. And then Michelle has what's one of the text expanders. So that way, if you enter like a shortcut, it'll bring up a group of feedback that you have. So that way you don't have to write it out every single time. Yeah. And so text expanders do take time to set up, but again, spending a little bit more time now really helps in the long run when you use it over and over again. Wonderful. And then just really quickly for challenge number 8. So this is also where you could say you'll provide specific feedback for select assignments, such as high stakes exams or assignments that will impact future assignments. I know I mentioned the rubric tool, and then one that was mentioned before is have a log of common feedback items that you could kind of copy and paste or set up that text expander with. Yeah, and so Jared mentioned that Canvas has a similar built-in feature with the comment library. Yeah, the one downside is you can only use one saved comment at a time. And again, in case you're saying, okay, well, some of these are great in chat, I am saving the chat and I just saved it again. So I will have it all within the Padlet. So you kind of have it as one resource there for you all. And so another one that was put into the Padlet is to use audio or video feedback. And so some students seem to prefer it as well because it's more informal. And I think especially for online courses, it helps with that instructor presence and knowing that you're human and a person. And so that's useful in my perspective. Great. So we're heading up to the last 10 minutes. And so this is an example by Dr. Tom Hogan for grading rubrics and having it being detailed to have actionable feedback to learners. And our second to last challenge is challenge number 9. I can't remember what to do when. So sometimes we're in the moment and focusing on, okay, what do I have to do today or tomorrow? And trying to plan ahead so that way you have reminders of what to do when. So what are some ways that you help yourself remember what to do at a specific week of the semester, or a certain daily task that you might do, etc.? So while you're thinking, I'll go over some examples is to use a checklist, or just like was mentioned earlier of writing notes for students that help in upcoming semesters. You could write a note to yourself as an instructor to be like, oh, during week 3, remind students about this. And so that way that can help. And you could also take those notes and create a more detailed instructor guide for you, either generically or for like for all your courses or for specific courses that you do have on repetition. And so what could that look like? Here is one version of a checklist. And so this is what to do every day is to check and respond to email, monitor if students are doing online discussions, and keep up with grading. Every week is to post an announcement, to summarize discussions, either in your synchronous in-person classes or online, hold office hours, or post grades. And if you are interested in a checklist, this one has a generic managing tasks and prioritizing time for a course. And this is a book that we have adapted from and had permission to share of what to do weekly, um, from the administrative side point, facilitative and evaluative. And then Penn State's Earth and Mineral Sciences took that one step further and has it really geared towards their online courses. And it includes what to do several weeks before, including copying the course over, making changes, etc. And then they have what to do the first week of the class, what to do daily, weekly, and then that mid-semester checkpoint, as well as you approach the end of the semester. So this is available for you to adapt and check out a little bit more along the way. And so some other examples include number 9, I have a whiteboard in my office. I post my to-dos, posted as the term rolls along. It is very fun to erase what has been accomplished. Yeah, that sense of like, oh, it's done, it's over. Also, as I'm just now setting up summer classes, I've created a to-do list for all classes and I just check off as I go along. Wonderful, thanks so much. And then 2 that are in the Padlet is I keep an electronic scheduler, a color-coded printout of class due dates, and use the school Outlook calendar and sticky notes. And then someone else said map out key courses, dates, action items for myself ahead of time on my Outlook calendar with at least 2 automatic reminders. That's great. Yeah, I add the catch-alls, like just to make sure that I did it. Here's another reminder later on. Wonderful. Thanks so much. So we'll give it about 5 more seconds before going to our last challenge. Okay, and so our last challenge is I don't know what students want from me. And so sometimes we know what our students want, but how do we get more feedback about what would make the course better, what would make your teaching better, what could make it easier for them cognitively, their mental health supports, etc. And so while you're thinking of that, the big thing is to ask them. I know that many of you have kind of end of semester surveys by your institution, but there are other ways. Just like this Padlet, you could say, hey, put what your expectations of me as an instructor are and allow them to post anonymously. And that way you could kind of build that in or address why you couldn't do it. I know one of the things when I've done this is like, it's to be funny. And I was like, well, I'm not really the funny one. My husband is, but I try to be funny by putting emojis or bitmojis within PowerPoint slides and saying and addressing it that way. Others including having a more formal mid-semester feedback or having kind of a comment drop box that's anonymous throughout the semester. And so if you haven't done anything like this, here is some example mid-semester questions that you could use or adapt for you, and some of them are rated as well as open-ended. And so Claire says, I included reflective polls at the end of each lesson to get feedback. That's great. And again, at the end of the course, a poll for improvement for the whole course. So that way you address during the end of each session or at the beginning of the next class. Shannon says, I used to start every class before anything else. What do you need from me? They were apprehensive, but then really started to ask questions they had when they started to trust. So yeah, having those, it might be awkward at first, but then they know that it's authentic and you are there to support them and it helps build that rapport. That's great. And then one other thing that we have used at Penn State for quite a while is the abbreviation of AVAIL. The second A used to be accessible, but now that we know are leaning towards accessible content of people who might need closed captions or other ones, it's now available. So AVAIL means you're active, visible, available, involved, and are a leader. So active means that you're there and present, that you're showing participation in the discussion boards, you're visible, that you're visibly in there grading, checking things, that you're available, that outside of office hours that you can meet with students, involved in their well-being, such as that trust, as Shannon mentioned, and then leading them. So leading them how to be more critical thinkers, problem solvers, etc. And then as far as the Padlet, someone else suggested in asynchronous courses, I suggest instructors use anonymous surveys they can fill out at the end of each module. These questions like, what do you feel is missing in the course? What kind of feedback do you prefer? Written, audio, or video? How can I make the material more engaging for you? And what are your biggest challenges? So that's a really great, and I like how it might be different for a class versus written or audio or video. And so that way you could pivot and adapt it for that class section. Great. Thank you all. Well, we are coming up on time. So I thank you all. I'll still stick around. And Amanda is going to put the survey for the session. And then what I will do again is update the Padlet with your wonderful responses. And I will post these two links in Discord as well. So it has a link to the Padlet that will have everyone's great examples, as well as the slides in case you wanted to see the ones that I showed from various instructors. So with that, thank you all and have a great rest of your day.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Amy. And thank you, everybody else, for joining us today. Once again, don't forget to fill out that session and conference survey that I threw in the chat, and I'll drop it one more time as well. But yeah, on behalf of Amy and myself, thank you again. And we hope to see you in the sessions coming up today, tomorrow, Friday. And have a great rest of your day. Bye.